r/nosleep. Posted by you/first. Breath 1. I did my grandfather's drugs. Part 1. The drugs sat in our medicine cabinet for months. 15 bright white pills in an ordinarily blue case. The label read heartburn medication. But, I knew better. Grandpa had been different in the time before he died. It was just the two of us in the house. When his routine started to change, it was noticeable. Late hours merged and melded with early mornings, and before long, Grandpa was gone more than he was home. I worried. He was a 75-year-old man. And yet, I wondered if he slept at all. One night, I caught Grandpa in the kitchen, sopping drunk and by himself. He was staring at a cabinet and repeating the national anthem to himself. I worried that his mind was starting to go. Instead, it was his body. My grandfather passed away that same week. Back in the day, he worked in the CIA. It was a secretive gig. Technically, I am not even supposed to tell anyone about his employment. But this is anonymous. Right? He is dead and buried. Unless any of you plan on tracking down my grandfather, and his unmarked grave, it should be safe to proceed. He worked in experimental medication. Pops was drunk enough to let that bit slip one night. I did a little research to connect the dots since his death. The results were shocking. In the 60s, Project MK Ultra was the code name given to a number of tests done, by the CIA, on human subjects. It was a horrible, and at times illegal, practice. In case you think I'm kidding, this next bit comes straight from Wikipedia. MK Ultra used numerous methods to manipulate people's mental states and alter brain function, including the surreptitious administration of drugs, especially LSD, and other chemicals, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, and other forms of torture. MK Ultra is famous. The information was brought to light by the Church Committee in 1975. Most of the documents were declassified in 2001. But, I had no proof my grandfather was involved. I called a few of his army buddies. Most of them hung up on the spot. They were never big fans of sentimentality, I guess. After all, Grandpa has been dead for a while, no state secret was worth spilling in the name of a lonely 28-year-old. I decided to keep the bit about the medication to myself until I reached my final call. The man that I was able to reach was named Johnson, and he was one of Grandpa's closest friends. They had fought in Korea together. After the war, they ditched one government job for another, and joined up with the CIA soon after they got home. His family visited on the holidays. Grandpa still called him regularly, before he passed away. If absolutely anyone knew anything, it would be this man. Yellow, answered the old and patient Midwestern voice on the line. I collected myself. If the last few calls taught me anything, these guys did not like panic. Good morning, I exclaimed. Too happy. Shit. Johnson, this is Matt, Herb's grandson? The line grew quiet on the other side. Ah, yes. How can I help you? He asked dryly. Well, you see, I found some pills here that are my grandfather's. And I don't really know what to do with them. Before I could finish, Johnson uttered a slew of curses into the phone. None of them sounded very natural or becoming, coming out of the mouth of a previously polite old man. I am a half hour away. Leaving now. Sit tight. Don't fucking touch those pills, boy. Your grandfather was an old fool for leaving them out. He hung up the phone and said nothing more. I stared at the white case on our kitchen table for 15 minutes. It had Grandpa's name in ordinary stenciled letters. There was even a prescribed doctor. The pills themselves seemed harmless to me. Something about their presence was mysterious and intoxicating. I missed my grandfather so much. More than I had let myself believe. The house was empty without him, and I was alone. The drugs called in a way that is impossible to explain. Maybe it was some misplaced nostalgia. I wasn't an addict. I didn't know what I was doing, or what the medicine was going to do. But, I wanted to feel what he felt. In my grief-stricken mind, that kind of thing sounded like a way for us to connect, one final time. Resolving the mystery before me would just be an added bonus. I took two with half a glass of water. The results were immediate. I never planned on that. To be honest, I don't know what I was planning. As soon as the pills entered my mouth, I regretted it. My vision started to flicker. It was like if someone was playing with the lights in a movie theater. Every few seconds, I could see the outline of the kitchen table or my refrigerator. Then everything would turn to black. Then it would illuminate again. I grabbed hold of the kitchen sink to steady myself. There was a window there, that looked directly out at the neighbors. I looked into the sunlight to stop the darkness. After a couple minutes, The flickering started to ease, and I was able to see more clearly. There was a large group of people sitting on the neighbor's front lawn. I never noticed them before. They were facing the neighbor's front door, as if they were waiting for someone to come outside. The clothes were odd, and seemed ill-fitting in the heat. A little girl turned to look in my direction. I waved. She did not wave back. I stared her down for a little while, desperately trying to make out the details. The little wore a black dress that dripped down well below her knees. Her hair was up and coiled in an 80s-esque bun. Her skin was pallid and milk-white in the reflective sun. And she was thin. Impossibly thin. The little girl grabbed an older woman's hand. The lady followed the child's gaze. In a moment, they were both staring at me. The older woman's wrinkles looked as though they had wrinkles. She was ancient, and definitely not someone I had ever seen around the neighborhood. What was truly stranger, though, was her dress. It was an elegant, period piece that seemed to poof out at the bottom by her legs. The whole ensemble swung around her feet in a perfected bob as she angrily marched across the street. The rest of the group got up and followed them. Their cold, black eyes never left mine. Then, they both stopped. As if on point. As if by some oddly organized and organic dance number. One sharp-dressed man had a knife sticking out of the back of his head. One promiscuously clad preteen was covered in blood, originating from her belly. 10 people raised their arms in the street, in unison, and pointed at me. I did not have much time to freak out. A familiar voice filled my kitchen. "You should not have done that, Matt." My grandfather was skinnier than I ever remembered. The gray hair on his head had started to fall out. That stayed the same. His skin still looked pasty and sick. His eyes were black, instead of their traditional blue. But his smile was comforting. His presence was awe-inspiring. "How is this possible?" I asked. "We buried you." Grandpa ignored me completely. Someone started to pound on our front door. But my grandfather's tone grew stronger and angrier. His voice boomed across the cavernous and cold kitchen like a megaphone. "I know where you have been, my boy, and I know how it ends." He paused as a pounding started on the front door. "You better turn from this path, before you end up like your old man." The door finally gave way to one final kick. Johnson stumbled in through it with a huff of breath and slew of cusses. "Did you fucking do it? You stupid fucking moron. They will know. You have been spotted," he gasped. "There are 100,000 dead fucks stuck in Salisbury County. Do you want to be one of them?" Somebody slapped me so hard it shook me right out of my state. I woke up in a hospital gown, with a very angry Johnson by my side. "You awake, kid? You can't go back to that house, you know that, right? You're marked. You just broke some very ancient and hallowed rules. Why do you think the program was shut down?" I mumbled something in reply. My head felt like the devil was playing drums. "Wait, do you remember anything?" Johnson asked, hopefully. I shook my head. "Oh, perfect. That's actually perfect." He collected himself. "Son. You survived a robbery. Bunch of goons hit the joint while you were sleeping. You will have to move. Burglars like to hit the same place twice, you know? Just looking out for you, kid." The heavy jowls on his face quaked furiously as he pulled a cell phone from his suit pocket and stepped away. I heard him mumbling in the background. Apparently, spy skills were off after a while. "Nah, kid remembers nothing. I cleaned out the apartment." Johnson listened to the other end. 12 pills in the case. Sounds about right. He popped a few before we got there, as you know. Johnson nodded a couple of times into the phone. As if the idiot on the other end could hear him. Finally, he ended it with a "Yes, sir," and sidled back over to my bedside. Johnson told me he could not stay. That I was fine, anyway. He promised to visit again, but never did. I followed his advice and moved out of my house a few weeks later. The same one I shared with my grandfather. It was hard to do. But, you know what they say. Sometimes closure is the only way. During a final sweep, I found a bright white pill stuck underneath the kitchen windowsill. I did not visit my grandfather yesterday. Maybe I will today. I did my grandfather's drugs. Again. Part 2. Call it what you will. I am definitely fucked up still. There was one more bright white pill, caught in a crack, just underneath my windowsill. I kept it safe until some of you broke my will. Let it slip, right? Fuck it. Maybe the truth behind the people outside is worth the sacrifice of my pride. My world is spinning still and my eyes burn as if they're covered in cyanide. I need to write this letter to you while there is time. Or maybe just before I lose the will. The effects of these drugs are a lot stronger and stranger than anticipated. The hospital in my first update kept me elated. Johnson made things seem fine. They're not. My quiet and picturesque cul-de-sac that once seemed empty has now come alive. In the day and in the night, I keep real still behind the windows, and I do my best to hide. My neighbor, Mrs. Morgan, is married, with a mortgage, midlife crisis, and a heckling but bustling family of 5. She is the sweet, innocent, type of housewife that smiles on the street and tucks her kids in every night at 9. Sometimes she stays up for a glass or two of white wine. She checks the locks too. No, 3 times. She arms a burglar alarm that was the most expensive one online. But there is no siren for the 40-year-old man that sits on the lawn outside. There is not another pair of eyes that see the dripping wound in his side. Jack lives in a starter home. Jack lives alone. The place was a gift from his mom, but in reality, he pays money back to her as a loan. The deal is a bargain until he can afford a proper place of his own. Jack has a baseball bat that he keeps by his bed. When the thunder claps the street, he usually goes outside to check on the body that he keeps hidden in the shed. Once satisfied, Jack shuts out the lights. I am the only one surprised by the shadow of a young woman sliding into his den. She slips into bed and snuggles close by Jack's side. Norma is a wonderful woman that lives with a few friends. They are the type upon which a girl can truly depend. She feels safe with them. But Norma also has an alcoholic boyfriend, named Ned, that she relentlessly defends. Sometimes, Ned hits her, usually around the time he struggles to get it up in bed. You might think there is no justice for a man whose own wife's blood he would so willingly shed. But there is a unique reprisal among the dead. Generations of Norma's ancestors have gathered from near and far. They clutter the driveway, lawn, and even the basement, by the bar. You see, Ned's last drink must be coming up quick. The ghosts of the past wait with open arms, razor claws, and closed fists. They anxiously anticipate each and every sip. Which one will be the last? Nathan loves the internet. He browses the stories online for hours at a time. He read all the best ones that he could find. He has memorized all of his favorite lines. Sometimes, Nathan reads them very late into night. There is a constant rustling in his sheets, and occasionally, some movement outside on the street. I know Nathan hears the noises too, because he wakes up often from his sleep often in the night. But he never checks. He never realizes the source of his nightmares is inside. 3 tall men with white stockings and black suits wait in the kitchen with hands full of knives. I see them all. As clear as morning in the fall. They wait on my lawn, as well, after all. A large group of strangers have congregated on the block like a fair. Some, but not all of them, like to frequently stare. There is middle-aged man with a hat sits on my porch rocking chair. There is a woman, with a white dress, that is missing all of her hair. Last but not least. My grandfather is also there. He reclines on the lawn in those old pajama bottoms. His hair is still white, but nothing else seems quite right. His once trustworthy eyes now shine blacker than the cold, dead night. His face is pallid and showing signs of some rot. I have avoided approaching him with everything I have got. The truth is that it makes my insides shudder to constantly consider these crazy thoughts. I have been trapped inside for 2 days and 2 nights and am still shaking from the fright. There is no way out when the shadows are constantly sniffing about. The reason I write in rhymes is not difficult to disguise. Frankly, I fear, this drug has made me lose my mind. Soon the dead will realize there is nowhere for me to hide. If anyone can help me, anyone at all. Please, God, try. Before he died, my grandfather offered one final piece of advice. Do not let the dead capture a soul that is still alive. Posted by you/first. Breath 1. The reason why I locked the door during a storm. The summer storm seemed harmless, at first. It struck on a hot, August night, not unlike tonight. Pretty little alerts buzzed happily on every cell phone inside the safety and sanctity of my living room. My wife, Emily, was the first one to read the emergency message aloud to the group. Flash flood warning in this area, she announced, with misplaced, sing-song optimism. Oh, I love watching a good storm. No sooner than she spoke, the evening sky erupted with forks of angry yellow lightning and buckets of cascading rain. 4 of us eagerly crowded around the bay window to watch. That night, we were entertaining guests at our house in the New Jersey suburbs. Emily's best friend, Diana, was visiting from the city. Unfortunately for me, that meant her annoying and arrogant boyfriend was along for the ride. Aaron was awful. I hoped the storm would save me from another one of his self-righteous sermons. I was wrong. Geez, This rain is biblical, I started, shaming myself for the bait. Noah's Ark withstood many times this rain, Aaron finished. Isn't that a fun fact? The Lord always provides. It was thankfully hard to hear his nasally voice. The gutters on our middle-class home, an admitted fixer-upper, were filling in seconds. That was about 8th on the long list of things to fix. I cursed myself again for the embarrassment that would surely follow. Well, I believe in morality. That should count for everybody, Emily countered with sass. I believe the basement might flood with this much rain, I muttered to no one in particular. Oh, gorgeous, Aaron said sarcastically. Might want to have a guy look at that, bud, that's dangerous if you plan on having kids in here. He continued on about having a guy for every homeowner situation, which was really just his wealthy father. I motioned for Em to follow me. She met me worriedly in the kitchen. After taking 2 steps down, it was apparent that I was right about the rain. On the outside of the house, the stairs leading to the basement door are underground. In extreme circumstances, that outdoor stairwell can flood if there is too much water in a short period of time. If it floods, an avalanche of water will pour into the basement as a means to evacuate the now filled basin of steps on the outside. In case that is hard to visualize, I took a video when this started. Here it is. The end result was that our floors were filthy and covered in inches of water. I mumbled a couple quick shits, shortly after this video was taken, and asked Em to help me unplug the electrical equipment. In a panic, I turned off the circuit to the entire floor. The lights cut accordingly. We were left in darkness and silence. Suddenly, the only sounds were Aaron's muted voice and the angry pattering of rain. And then, Emily screamed. I sloshed across the cold water and reached out into the inky blackness for her. After a chest-tightening couple of seconds, I wrapped my arms around Em's shaking cold frame, and thanked God that she was alright. Call that an overreaction at this stage. But my nerves were already shot, and I thought she got shocked. What happened? Are you okay? I asked. Em gasped and caught her breath. Something swam by me. If the prospect of dealing with an insurance provider had not freaked me out already, that did. Panic built up inside my throat like a lump. We need to shovel the water out of the staircase. The drain must be clogged. I started to look for my boots, but they must have floated into the office. I'll be right back, maybe Aaron will help me. No, Emily shouted suddenly. She gripped my arm so hard that there were red impressions from her fingernails. Don't go outside. It's dangerous. She was right, as always. The wind alone was sure to take down a few trees, not to mention the lightning passing through like a constant, convulsing current. Either of those things made going outside pure stupidity. The emergency alert warned people to stay indoors. I nodded and followed her out. We headed back up to the kitchen like depressed, waterlogged squeak toys. Diana was the first to greet us at the top. Look at the two of yous. Did you pop a pipe? I ignored her. So did Emily. We were pissed enough, and tolerance for their bullshit had reached an all-time low. Soon enough, Aaron rounded the corner and let out an open guffaw at our drenched clothes and hair. How's the weather down there, guys, huh? Right? I think I mumbled something about his stupid fucking golf cap. I regret that. Especially now. Emily gasped behind me, but I didn't care at the time. He was an asshole, and he deserved it. I escaped the kitchen into the sanctity of my bedroom in search of some dry clothes. Our German shepherd, Lola, was locked in there by herself. Aaron did not like dogs. Of course. The pup seemed to be taking the tough treatment well enough. She had been quiet all night. But now that I was in there, I could see her head was stuffed under the bed. I reached out to pet her head and was greeted with a nasty snarl in return. Emily's voice echoed through the hallways and pulled me away from the dog before I could give her any concern. Oh my God, Matt, it's hailing. Either the devil was dancing on our rooftop, or she was right, again. I looked outside and saw fist-sized balls of ice punch their way into the pavement of my already chipped driveway. I cursed myself. This time for leaving the car outside. I closed the bedroom behind me and joined the group back in the kitchen. Diana seemed to be following the same line of thought. Emily, the Jag is out there. That stupid car cost more than this house. Can we use your garage? She asked. Well, I guess our cars aren't in there. She shot me a knowing glance. But don't go outside, Dee, it's really unsafe. It's just a little ice water. In August, she snorted. Hey, maybe those asshole scientists are right, huh? Pastor Pete says not to trust it, though. Just another hoax. She pulled open the deck door before we could protest her anymore. This is bonkers. Guys, it's freezing. You feel this? Are we still in Jersey? I did. The air was so cold that it wafted its way through the kitchen. Subconsciously, the three of us backed away from the open door just as the balls of hail in the sky shifted to pristine snowflakes. Diana. Get inside, now, Aaron started. I'll be right back, Han. Stop, she countered from the doorway. Diana, you stupid fucking idiot, get in this house right now, Aaron said sternly. How holy. Of course, that made Dee more mad. She slammed the door and disappeared into the growing fog. And then it was quiet. We waited for her in silence. At first it felt like only a minute. Emily was pacing back and forth while I surveyed damage to the rest of the house. A few trees seemed to have fallen in the backyard. The snow was accumulating at a record pace. In what seemed like only a couple minutes, there was already a half-foot of it on the ground. The wind whipped it back and forth to create drifts of a foot or deeper. I was watching it from the bathroom when Aaron called out for our attention. I never heard a car start. The three of us converged again by the deck door. The backyard was a backdrop of white. It was impossible to see the driveway. Did either of you hear a car? We have to go find her, Aaron continued in a growing frenzy. We cannot go out there, Emily said in a mouse-like tone. Just wait another minute. Aaron looked from me to my wife. I shrugged in his direction. To hell with you both. You belong there, with your morality bullshit. Open the door. Aaron pushed Em out of the way in his haste. Before he got halfway there, I grabbed him by the collar and threw him out the door myself. Then I slammed it shut. The house was then quiet again. We were left with Aaron's golf cap, thrown back inside with the wind. I was just about to remark about what an asshole he was, when suddenly, an enormous roar punctured through the storm. Emily and I darted to the deck window to check it out. At first, there was nothing to see. Waves of snow sheets encompassed every corner and tree branch on our property. Visibility was low. But then, in the corner of the yard, a flash of red jacket alerted my eyes to a shape moving quickly by the driveway. It was Aaron. He was trying to run across the snow. But he wasn't getting far. He kept looking behind him, at something just outside my line of sight. After a few feet, he seemed to give up altogether and fall helplessly to the ground. Then the thing behind him came into focus. Oh God, oh my God, oh my God, Matt, look at it. Look at it. Look at it, look at it, look at it, what the fuck is that? The snow blocked most of my view, but some facts were easily discernible. In comparison to Aaron, the creature stood at least 3 feet taller. Its back was hunched and its skin was covered in a matted, dark-colored hair. It followed our former friend lazily. There was no haste to its movement. When it caught him, it lifted him up in the air like a chew toy. The sickening crunch was more than enough for me to grab Emily and hold her eyes up against my shoulder. Neither of us needed to see any more. My first instinct was to lock the doors. Lola was barking, and that would draw attention. I knew whatever was outside would soon set its sights on the house. I grabbed Em's hand and ran to lock each lock. For once, I thanked myself for spending money on security, that summer. When that was done, we huddled in the bedroom with the dog and waited it out. It was quiet, again. I know, given the absolute shit show that we just witnessed outside our own house, you would think it would be panic. But, Lola now knew to be silent. She took to her spot under the bed. Emily whimpered, but her voice was muffled under the covers. I watched the window. The snow was not stopping. After only an hour or so, more than a foot had piled up. There is always a stillness in nature when such a storm occurs. But there was something too still. Sure enough, moments later, the loud crunch of footsteps outside confirmed my theory. Open the door, echoed a familiar and haunting voice from somewhere in the distance. You two idiots. Open the door. Emily and Lola both cried by my side. I felt helpless. Something started to tap at the walls of the house. It ran back and forth and tapped each door and window it could find. Like it was searching for weaknesses. The noise sounded like long nails clicking against the wood frames. Seemingly frustrated, the voice called out again, this time with a horrible parody of Diana's obnoxious Brooklyn accent. Look at the two of yous. Just another hoax. The curious scratching focused on the front door. Then it turned into a vicious pounding. This is bonkers. It screeched with a horrible, throaty laugh. It coughed. The voice was horribly disjointed as it switched behind Diana and Aaron's two very different tones. Open the door. The Lord always provides. Open the door. The Lord always provides. Open the door, please, Matt. Open the door, please, Emily. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door. Emily screamed alongside it in a hysterical, horribly wounded, yet still battle-ready tone of her own. Go fuck yourself. Then she did something I had never seen her do in 5 years of marriage. She got down to one knee and prayed. The prayer was not to anyone in particular. Em was never that religious. I could not even hear much of what she was saying through the horrible banging outside. But, somehow, she looked at peace. She thanked someone, anyone, for our life. She thanked them for our house, and for our memories inside. For all the warm times and holidays spent around the fireside, with seasons of Netflix and cases of bottled wine. She thanked them. All of them. Any and all gods that might be present on earth on that hellish evening. And when she finished, she offered them one final line. If someone is watching what is happening to us. She started to sob desperately among the scrapes. Please help. Something answered. The pounding receded, weakly, at first. Then the great footsteps that arrived exited the same way they came. After another agonizingly silent hour, the snow started to taper and disappear altogether. Moonlight crept into the windows as the clouds receded and snow melted swiftly in the rising sun. When the morning came, the weather finally died down. Our friends were reported missing. They have not been found. Tonight is the 1-year anniversary of their disappearance. There is a warning for another severe storm. We will not be opening the door. Posted by you/first, Breath 1. I caught the wrong train and it will not stop. The date is January 3, 2018. It is 9:45 a.m. I don't have a lot of time. I doubt this will ever get out. I have posted it in a few places, on loop, just to be safe. There was a sharp, sucking sensation in my stomach this morning. Almost like I knew something was coming. Almost like the feeling of déjà vu, mixed in with a spattering of butterflies, all coagulated in the pit of my gut. I ignored it all. The alarm blasted at 9 minutes to 5, one final time, by my bedside. I slammed the buzzer just to shut it up. I shucked on some khakis in the dark, and grabbed a wrinkled polo from the floor. My wife was still asleep. I kissed her goodbye, one final time, while she rubbed her eyes and mumbled a half-hearted, I love you. Before she sighed and added, good night. I laughed, loudly, and told her I loved her too. Our big German shepherd, Lola, started to stir. I had to be quick so as to not wake her up. And so, quickly, quietly, I slipped out the door without another word. I locked every lock. We had an incident, years before, that did not need repeating. My ride to the train station takes 20 minutes. I have timed it out over the years. 10 minutes on Apple Farm Road. 10 minutes by the Parkway entrance. A perfect 20 in total. The aluminum coffin arrived at 5:25. I was late. There was no real reason for any apprehension. Late arrivals had happened before. I knew there would be another train in an hour, and I could always sleep it off in my car. The North Jersey coastline is the only train that stops at our small town station. It is impossible to miss. On the drive down, it started to snow in my neck of New Jersey. The scenery was breathtaking. Almost every tree, sign, and local road was covered with an untouched white sheet. But the traffic was likely to slow my arrival even more. Sure enough, as soon as I pulled up to the station, the train was already boarding passengers. I pulled the keys out of the ignition and hauled my work bag over my shoulder in a hurry. It was still dark. The salt put down to melt the snow was slippery than helpful. Several times, my stupid leather shoes slid across patches of black ice covering the cracks in the black pavement. I hoofed the steps up to the station 2 at a time, when suddenly, my foot slipped. I tried to grab the handrail for balance. But it was of no use. I had too much momentum at the time, and my shoes could not find the right balance. My ankle gave out some time before my head smacked against the concrete staircase. One moment, I was thinking about the conductor keeping the door open. The next, well, I don't remember much. I woke up to an empty platform. It took a moment, but eventually, I got to my feet and wiped the snow off my face. Everything was exactly the same, minus the waiting train. I reasoned that I must have knocked myself out. Nobody was there to call an ambulance. My ankle was a bit sore and sure, and my head throbbed a bit. But nothing was bruised. Nothing was broken, other than my phone, and a bit of pride. I sat down on the bench and glanced down the tunnel hopefully. As if on command, a whistle blared somewhere in the distance. I thought it was my lucky day. Eagerly, I waited behind the yellow line as another silver-clad NJ Transit shimmied into view. The doors opened. No one got out. I didn't care. I hopped into the nearest carriage and grabbed a seat. The doors closed a moment later. When we left the station, I pulled out my laptop. It still works. Soon after, a stirring behind me indicated that a ticket collector could be on the lookout. I had forgotten to put my ticket in the holder. I was distracted. I turned to face him and tried to grab my wallet at the same time. When I finally looked up, I nearly dropped everything. The man standing by my side was wearing a long black overcoat that cut off just below his knees. Underneath, he had ornately patterned pants that met a pristine, purple, tuxedo jacket. His face topped it all off. He had a long, elongated, walrus mustache. And mutton chops. So, I don't think I was being rude when I asked. Is it Halloween? And yet, the man looked as if I shot him in the heart. Excuse me, sir? He asked, while pointing aggressively to the NJ Transit name tag pinned to his overcoat. Ticket? I nodded and grabbed my ticket off the floor. After I placed it in the holder, he mumbled HMPF, and wrote something down in his little notebook. Then he walked off into the next carriage. Cane and all. That was enough for me to start this story. But soon after he left, I started to notice something changing, in the passenger window. The sky started to brighten. At first, I chalked it up to the rising sun, but this brightness was all-encompassing. I couldn't see anything. Every window in the train had the shutters down just to keep it out. My carriage door opened again. The woman who stepped out was young and beautiful. She had blonde hair, primed up in a neat little bun underneath her pink beret. She looked like a lady off to peruse the big city. Sometime around 1960. There was something about her appearance that was eerily familiar. After a moment, the woman pulled out her matching pink purse and started to apply her blush in an ornate, you guessed it, pink mirror. It was all too much. The woman was dressed like a carbon copy of my mother in 1960. I laughed out loud. She turned to me suspiciously in response, and I had to say something. And so I decided to try to solve the number one mystery on my mind. Excuse me, ma'am, do you know if this train is going to Penn Station? I am a bit lost, I chuckled nervously to try and diffuse the tension. She eased up and laughed along with me. We're all going somewhere, was all she said, with a smile. Then she turned back to her makeup. I was confused by her avoidance of the question. The whole situation started to seem suspicious. Well, what station are you going to? I asked hopefully. She smiled back, and seemed to welcome the friendly conversation. Oh, well, my son Matthew is in the hospital. He needs one more round of chemotherapy. It was caught early, so it's nothing to be too frightened about, but I hated leaving him overnight. His dad has to work. That took me back a bit. Wow, what a coincidence, I had to through the same thing, back in the 60s. It was awful back then, modern medicine is so much better. I shuddered considering the drugs and procedures my parents had put me through. When Mom died, that was the time the medicine finally stopped. I survived just fine. The woman's response made me a lot more worried. What year do you think it is, boy? Her voice was starting to sound more familiar. I started to put the pieces together in my head just as she suddenly stood up. Mom? I asked quietly. This seems like my stop, she announced, to no one in particular. How do you know that? We're still moving, I asked. Oh, I don't know, she continued excitedly. She turned to look at me, with bright, blue, wide eyes. I can just feel it. This is my stop. This is where I belong. The woman put her things in her bag again. She stood up and walked towards the door. Then, she offered me one last bit of strange conversation as confirmation. Have a nice day, sir, truly, it was nice meeting you. You remind me of my boy. He's got freckles too. The train stopped. The doors opened, and the lady exited that looked like my mother exited. The blinding light behind her was enough to make me shield my eyes. Then, just as suddenly as we stopped, we started again. I was alone again. I wondered if I should get up and investigate more. Instead, I sat down and typed some more. After 5 minutes, someone else opened the carriage door. I recognized him immediately. 6 years ago, my wife had a stalker. He harassed her with emails and texts for months on end. This problem got so serious that, on several occasions, he snuck into her house and stole several items. One night, when we were still dating, I came home to find the stalker holding a knife to my wife's neck. I beat his head in with a metal bat. And now, there he was sitting across the aisle from me, wearing a denim jacket and some fucking khakis. Fresh, free, and no older than 23. The same way he would be if he never met me. Excuse me? I asked nervously. He pulled the headphones from his ears and turned to me in surprise. "What the hell are you doing here?" He smiled nervously. It was the look of someone who was embarrassed that they were dumb enough to talk to a stranger. "I'm sorry, sir. Everybody's going somewhere, right, killer?" He grinned awkwardly. The light in the carriage seemed to get darker as he spoke. It was no longer blinding. I turned away from him to get a better look. But when I did, the train stopped again. The man that I murdered, once upon a time, paid me no more mind as he got up and exited the train in a hurry. It was silent again. I returned to the window and pulled back the shade. It was definitely dark. In fact, it was so dark that it was hard to see anything at all. There was a fire somewhere in the distance. As the train chortled along, the flames started to come into better view, and I could see some people were standing beside it. The date is January 3, 2018. It is 9:45 a.m. There are shapes outside my window that are bigger than any man or beast I have ever seen. The train has not stopped. We should have hit Penn Station by now. No one has entered my carriage for an hour. I don't feel like it's my time to leave. The flames in the distance are not so far away anymore. There are more fires. It's almost as if I can feel them lick underneath my feet. More people are gathered around them in the distance. They look angry. What's worse, is there is another noise, underneath the hum of the engine. I can hear a chorus of constant screaming. I do not know the train's final stop. I pray to God that it does not end here.